Hi, I'm Eva Pilgrim. Thanks for streaming with us. Day 12 of testimony in the Sean and Diddy Combs trial, and we should note this show will contain graphic content from the courtroom today. Testimony started with a cross-examination of celebrity stylist Deontay Nash. He told the jury yesterday that he saw Combs being physically violent toward ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura. When asked by the defense today about whether he knew other men were part of her sexual encounters with Combs, Nash testified that Ventura kept part of her life secret from him. A former employee of Combs was next up on the stand. She testified under the pseudonym Mia. She's one of the 4 alleged victims in this case. Federal prosecutors alleged Combs subjected Mia to physical violence, psychological torture, and threats of financial and reputational harm. Today, she testified about being raped by Combs. Asked to describe the relationship between Combs and Ventura, Mia responded, "It was a cycle of highs and lows, unequal and equal, toxic, I'd say abusive, like it was abusive towards her." On vacation in Turks and Caicos, Mia recalled Cassie Ventura running and screaming into her hotel room. She was screaming for help and saying, "You gotta help me, he's gonna kill me." Combs has pleaded not guilty to all charges. His defense team says any sexual encounters were consensual. If convicted, Combs faces the possibility of life in prison. Our team has been closely following the case from inside the courtroom. We begin with ABC News Chief Investigative Correspondent Aaron Katersky live outside the federal courthouse here in Manhattan. Aaron, Mia at one point today said that Sean Combs sexually assaulted her. What was that moment like in the courtroom?
This may have been the most harrowing and some of the most consequential testimony of the entire trial so far. Eva, the courtroom fell silent. Mia kept her eyes cast down. For most of her testimony, the jury saw nothing but the part in her hair on the top of her head, and the jury paid rapt attention. Her friends were sobbing in the back row. They had come to support her, and while she was sobbing and speaking haltingly in stilted speech, she said that Sean Combs sexually assaulted her. He's denied sexually assaulting anyone, but she said it was not just once that it occurred. The first time, she said, was in the Plaza Hotel while Sean Combs was celebrating his 40th birthday. It was in the penthouse. She said that Sean Combs called her into the kitchen and forced his hand up her dress. And then later in Los Angeles at his house, she recalled sleeping in a bunk bed where she said Combs forbade anyone from locking doors. And she remembered waking up to the weight of him on her, and he forced himself inside her. It was quiet. Pin drop is a bit of a cliche, Eva, but that was the kind of attention that everyone was paying as she was describing these harrowing moments.
Mia also described Cassie Ventura as like a sister. She said she was around Cassie and Combs a lot. What did she say she saw?
Yeah, and in fact, she said that Sean Combs threatened to tell Cassie about these alleged assaults so she would effectively lose her friends. That was the kind of environment that she was seemingly living in. But she was on vacation, she said, in Turks and Caicos when Cassie Ventura came screaming into her hotel room and saying, "She's got to help me." She remembered Cassie otherwise being chill and calm, and this, she recalled, was a terrified type scream. She remembered another time where the two of them had to escape from Sean Combs after something happened. They grabbed paddle boards and paddled out to sea to get away from him, leaving him ranting and raving and following them on the beach. But Eva, think of this entire scene. She says that as his personal assistant, she was made to sit in the bathroom with him while she's on the toilet, was made to be in his closet, where she said another sexual assault occurred when he forced himself in her mouth. And so she felt like he was the king. She had nowhere to go. She couldn't tell him no about a sandwich, she testified. She couldn't tell him no about anything.
Did Mia say why she never went to police about any of this?
She talked about it as though she felt like the police weren't going to listen. And she said something that I think the jury paid attention to, and that was, this was before social media. This was before really the Me Too era when anyone had stood up to someone so powerful as Sean Combs. And she recalled this story about being pulled over, and she was nervous about being late to meet Combs, and she told the officer, I'm going to be late for to meet my boss. Well, who's your boss? She said Sean Combs, and the officer laughed at her and said, yeah, right, put him on the phone. And so she did, and she remembered the demeanor of the officer, laughing, couldn't believe she was talking to the Sean Combs. And she said it left her feeling like, what police officer could she possibly go to that would believe her account of a sexual assault?
Mia worked for Combs, and during her time with him, she says he suspended her from her job without pay. Why?
Suspended her on a couple of occasions after he accused her of insubordination. And some of those times she believed it was his behavior that he was reacting to. And specifically, she recalled one time when another employee named Kayla actually went to report her suspicion that Sean Combs was assaulting Cassie Ventura. And she remembered getting into a fight with Kayla, punching, whatever. And this woman wasn't fired for punching Mia. She was fired, Mia said, for reporting to Human Resources of Bad Boy her suspicion that Sean Combs had assaulted Cassie. That was the kind of environment she said she was working in.
Sean Combs obviously was sitting there watching everything she had to say today. Did he have any reaction to all of this?
He's been leaning back away from the table, seated more stretched out. And while at the beginning of court he interacted a bit with his family, during this testimony he would shake his head, but he would also turn to the jury box to see how the jury was taking in all of these harrowing details, clearly interested in whether Mia's testimony was cutting through.
Aaron Kotursky for us there outside federal court. Thank you, as always. And joining us now is ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer. Brian, you were in court earlier today. What do you think the big moment of the day was?
I think the big moment of the day is when Mia described that alleged rape as Aaron Kotursky put out for it. And now, understand, I'm watching her in the courtroom. We are legally not allowed to describe her features. They're not allowed to have court sketches. But as you watch this woman, as Aaron pointed out, looking down for the most part, having her bangs kind of over her head, just painfully describing this incident where she wakes up and she's sobbing in between speaking quickly and also harshly at times, and describes how Sean Combs allegedly took one hand and told her shh, and then allegedly forced himself into her, and having the question asked, what do you mean by that? And then explaining what part of Sean Combs he allegedly did that to her.
We heard Mia, they're talking, she's one of 4 victims in this case. She also talked about how close she was with Cassie. Why does that relationship matter?
So I think it matters for 2 reasons. One, don't forget, when she first started working, she was Sean Combs' personal assistant. And so it's somewhat weird that, according to her testimony at least, Sean Combs told her to stay with Cassie, to kind of keep tabs on her. And so I think in part feeds this idea of, is this a criminal enterprise? Are you having someone keep track of someone that the government is now saying you are sex trafficking and you're keeping in these freak-offs? But also it allows for her to testify about all of these events, the going out into the paddleboard in the water to escape Sean Combs, the allegedly putting up furniture in front of a door so he doesn't break in, and of course the violence that she's testified to that Sean Combs purportedly put onto Cassie. It gives more corroboration and more color to Cassie's testimony.
Now, we also heard more from Deontay Nash. He finished his testimony today. What did you think of him as a witness? So
Deontay Nash was, for lack of a better term, he was riveting. I think sometimes during his cross-examination, you would probably say somewhat sassy at times. And going back and forth with the defense attorney, I think seeing him for who he truly actually is, I think lended to his credibility. And you saw the manner in which he conducted himself. And I think he became very credible in the way he spoke. And so when he was able to talk about light moments where the jury would laugh about, yeah, I set up Cassie with Michael B. Jordan because he fine and she fine and they both single. But also when he talked about the harsh moments, you really got pulled in and say, this is a person who has no stake in this. And he seems to be honest in everything he says.
Can we talk about the judge that's in this trial? What do we know about him?
Yeah, so Judge Arun Subramanian, sorry. He was appointed to be the judge here in 2022 by former President Joe Biden. And we know he's a Columbia law grad, very sharp, very smart. I've never gone before him in court. I do practice in the same courtroom. But we do know that prior to being a judge, he was a partner at Sussman Godfrey LLC, where he did commercial and bankruptcy law. He seems to be very much running a tight tight ship, always saying, let's get this done at this time. We're going to close it at this time. We're going to make sure the witnesses get off the stand. And he's really pushing this case to end before the July 4th weekend, as he promised the jury.
Brian Buckmeyer, thank you so much. We'll come back to you in just a bit. Coming up, breaking down Mia's testimony and the impact it could have on the trial. Also ahead, there is massive interest in this trial online. When we come back, former Deputy DA and host of the Live Trials podcast, Emily Baker, takes your questions about the case. Stay with us. Welcome back to Burden of Proof, the case against Diddy. Breaking down what happened in court for us today, Brian Buckmeyer playing the role of defense and taking on the role of prosecution, Shauna Lloyd, managing partner at the Cochran firm and ABC News legal contributor. Let's get right into it. Shauna, we'll start with you. Deontay Nash, beginning of the day. What did you think of him?
I thought he was a great witness. If I'm the prosecution, I'm happy with his performance. I'm happy with his testimony. He was clean, concise. He hit home the points that they wanted to highlight. Even when the defense tried to shake him on the idea that Cassie might not have been a good performer or she didn't actually have a future, he was steadfast. He did not let them sway him, and that is exactly what you need in a witness on the stand.
Brian, what do you think the defense wanted the jury to take away from his testimony?
I think on cross-examination, what they wanted him to take away was that he might be somewhat biased to some extent because of how much she loves Cassie, platonically, not romantically, but also to try to paint a different side of the relationship. The fact that he set her up with Michael B. Jordan, for example, that she was able to date other people, that her relationship with Sean Combs wasn't so tied off and closed off that she couldn't do the things that she wanted to. I think try to paint a different picture here, a broader picture of a relationship with highs, but some lows as well.
Shauna, we have to talk about Mia. The prosecution called her to the stand. Watching her speak on the stand, what do you think they were trying to accomplish?
I think they accomplished what they were looking for. We have to remember and look at the trial in context, right? So we have this relationship with Cassie that was very messy. The consent was very fluid. People aren't sure. Here's what I did is I just shored up my case because I have a witness on the stand who is clearly testifying in angst. You can tell that she's anxious, she's nervous. She thought she would never, and testified to the fact that she never thought this would come out to the light of day. She talks about the fact that the reason she didn't expect it to come out was because at that time, sexual abuse was something people didn't talk about. Now there's the Me Too movement and other things. She talked about her harrowing experience. At one point in time, she and Cassie runs into her room and says to her, he's gonna kill me. They run out, they're on paddle boards in the ocean. She says, a storm comes in. And she says on the paddleboard, she has to think about the decision. Is it scarier to face nature or is it scarier to go back and face Puff? Quote. That to me is impactful. The jury absorbed that to realize if someone's talking about nature versus a person, that's a very powerful statement to say that you believe that he has that much control over you, your career, and where you're going. She talked about this being the job of her dreams. She worked so hard for that. And she said she watched him do so many things that she thought that that would disappear in a moment. So that type of testimony is very powerful because you're talking about his personal assistant. This is not someone he was involved with. This was someone who worked for him. She was an employee. She shouldn't be in those situations to have to make those decisions. And that's what she testified to, watching the abuse of Cassie and having to work. Her first week, 5 days straight, she stayed awake. She talked about how her Adderall that she was legally prescribed for her ADHD assisted her. That's powerful testimony.
Brian, as the defense listening to all this, I mean, there's 4 victims in this case. Are you starting to get worried that there's a pattern of behavior that you're going to have to deal with?
Yeah, as a defense, you're going to have to try to separate these. And as Shauna was saying, like this behavior kind of bleeds over. That this is not a relationship like with Cassie, but also there are no allegations of Mia being trafficked. There's no allegations of the criminal enterprise making her participate in freak-off. So I think, again, they have to walk the tightrope of he is a violent person. He is an abusive person, and agree to that and understand that. But I think what ultimately is going to happen is they're going to go back to the indictment, and eventually the judge is going to give them instructions as to how they're supposed to understand these charges, how they're supposed to apply the evidence to it, and then they're going to say, does this match trafficking? Does this match a criminal enterprise? Yes, it's bad. Yes, it's rape. Yes, it's this, but does it match? I think that's the only tightrope to walk.
I'm going to push back on you there because what Mia did in her testimony when she talked about those 5 days, she talks about how the staff and others said, we're going to see if you can make it. So obviously there's a pervasive idea in this culture, this forced labor. She speaks to that. So I think that's what they were gaining on and with her testimony.
And I think what they're going to do for the defense is she used to work for Mike Myers and used to have a 10 to 6, but working for Mike Myers and working for Sean Combs, two very different things. It's a higher standard of work.
Brian, Shauna, thank you both for being here with us today. Coming up, former Deputy DA and host of the Live Trials podcast, Emily D. Baker, takes your questions about the case. Also ahead, a look at what the music industry is saying or not saying about the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Welcome back. The Sean Diddy Combs trial is now in its third week. So far, it's been full of moments that have captivated the internet. So what are the big questions people are asking about this high-profile trial? To help me answer that is legal analyst and former Deputy LA District Attorney Emily D. Baker. She's the host of the Live Trials podcast on YouTube, where she live streams legal commentary on high-profile trials and answers the burning questions people have about cases we're all obsessed with online. Emily, before we get to those questions, I just want to get your thoughts on what happened today. A former Combs employee testifying under the pseudonym Mia. She testified about violent attacks, that he sexually assaulted her while he was her boss. What are your thoughts on her testimony?
Well, for the prosecution, you can see why this is such a powerful witness, because not only does she support a lot of what Cassie said, but it also goes to this criminal enterprise. She's an employee that is not only there seeing what's going on, but testifying that if she didn't comply, then she's being suspended without pay, and the level of coercion and control that was going on. She's a victim of Combs, she's an employee of Combs, but she can also testify to the things she saw happen to Cassie, which supports Cassie's testimony further. And a lot of the witnesses and victims for the government have overlapped in seeing what happened to others who have testified or will testify.
Okay, let's get to the top questions that you're being asked about this trial from your followers. You call them the law nerd community. First up, how does Cassie Ventura's civil lawsuit factor into the criminal prosecution?
Absolutely. I think it was so noticeable when that indictment dropped how much it lined up with Cassie Ventura's civil suit. That civil suit being public really, I think, was a shot across the bow for what might come. And then when we saw the raid of Sean Combs's properties, I think everybody was just waiting for this indictment to drop. I think her civil suit was absolutely instrumental in setting the groundwork for this indictment and ultimately this trial. It also indicated that she's willing to testify. She's willing to come out there publicly and talk about what happened to her. That's incredibly powerful.
And we should note that that civil lawsuit was settled with no admission of wrongdoing. We've been relying for us on a team of reporters that are inside the courtroom for information. And this question, I think, is really interesting. Why aren't there cameras in the Diddy trial?
It's incredibly frustrating. I was there for the Diddy arraignment, and it was a packed courtroom. I can only imagine how packed it is inside and outside the courthouse now. But federal courts do not allow cameras. They do not allow even audio. So everyone has to fight to find a seat in courtrooms. I hope that federal courts will open up and show the public how the process is playing out in these massive trials, because people want to know what's happening, and keeping the public out just creates more problems.
This one is something I think everyone wants to know. Will Diddy testify, or will his lawyers tell him not to?
To lawyer this first, his lawyers can't stop him from testifying if he wants to testify, even if they think it's a bad idea. And I just wonder, after weeks and weeks of hearing people talk about their experience with Diddy, if he's going to want to set the record straight in his own words, as we've seen so many high-profile defendants do. But I imagine his lawyers, all of them, will be telling him that that cannot be a good thing. But we heard in their opening that they are leaning into these were consensual relationships. And yes, he's violent, but this isn't trafficking. And that's a nuanced legal argument that might go right out the window if he chooses to take the stand, because the lawyers are trying to argue the nuance of the charges, and Diddy testifying is going to be all that the jury focuses on if he does.
Emily D. Baker, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Sean Combs' music career spans decades. He created a hit-making empire with big-name performers, earning a reputation as a savvy music mogul. His accolades over the years include 3 Grammy Awards, 5 #1 hits, 15 top 10 hits on the Billboard charts. He was even honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So, what impact could this trial have on the music industry? ABC News contributor and DJ Megan Wright is here to break it all down for us. Megan, I'm curious, what has the reaction been inside the music industry?
So here's the thing. I haven't really heard, people talk about this more than they already have. I haven't really heard any new names. Okay, so we have 50 Cent, who has always been very, very vocal about this, even on Instagram, who's recently name dropped in the trial from Diddy's former assistant. So of course he's talked about it, and then he is also going to be producing a documentary on it. You have your media personalities that are also in the music business, whether they're radio or podcasting, that are also talking as they were before. I believe Aubrey O'Day from Dan and D. Kane, who many people thought was also going to testify. She's standing 10 toes down on her viewpoint on this. You also, after Kid Cudi got on the stand, you have rapper Young Thug, who took to X and called Kid Cudi a snitch. And that got conversations kind of going on social media about what the definition of a snitch was. But as far as any new names, I haven't seen anything. I have not seen more people step forward and make comments about this.
I'm curious, with the trial going on and all of the things that are out there now, have you heard anyone talk about not playing the music, about maybe don't put that on this playlist, or it doesn't get played inside of venues anymore?
So this isn't a new conversation. Okay, so you think about, I guess the big question is, can you separate the art from the person? And what this reminds me of is what kind of happened with the R. Kelly trial, okay? And also something that we know in music and in the business, when there's any kind of controversy or any chaos or things that people are talking about it, those streams go up. So as you saw in the R. Kelly trial, his streams went through the roof when that whole thing was happening. Also with Diddy, when he was arrested, streams through the roof. But, I'm not throwing shade at Diddy in any way, shape, or form, but coming from as a DJ, there are a very select few Diddy songs that are solely him that you're really playing. It really falls under his massive Bad Boy catalog. But in that catalog with these artists, whether it's Biggie, whether it's Mary J. Blige, Lil Kim, Usher, you do hear his ad-libs and his vocals, and he's a part of these songs, but are fans gonna stop supporting those artists and listening to them? I don't think so.
Are there still Diddy fans? Will people stop? Do you think people will stop listening?
I don't think people will stop listening. Again, I think of history and what we've seen with other artists. Has things changed? Yes. Have people's opinions changed? Yes, absolutely. Is everybody gonna stop? No, but then again, Diddy has been in the game for 30 years. So that's 30 years of music. And most of that music is not solely his. So to erase everything that Bad Boy did and take the entire Bad Boy catalog away from fans and listeners, I don't see that happening.
Whatever happens with this trial, do you think artists would work with him ever again?
I think things have changed. I think there are many that will not. But I think that there are people who have been vocal and who have been supportive of him. And I think that it will make headlines. And people like headlines. So do I think there are some individuals that will work with him? I do. Do I think it's anywhere close to the extent? Absolutely not.
Megan Wright, it's always so lovely to have you.
So good to see you.
Thank you for being with us. And thank you for joining us. We'll be back with new episodes every day of the trial. The show streams right here on ABC News Live, Disney Plus, and Hulu, weekdays at 5:30 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. For even more on the Diddy trial, make sure to follow our podcast, Bad Rap, The Case Against Diddy, hosted by our very own Brian Buckmeyer on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'm Eva Pilgrim in New York. Have a good rest of your day.